and it's Thursday, and Katie's with me this week, and we're going to continue some conversation we've been having. But first, I've got a few either-or questions for you, Katie.
Okay.
Quick, rapid questions, and I'll just go through them really quick. So first one, favorite vacation spot?
Oh, I have two. One is at home on Plum Island, where I get to sink my toes in the sand, eat seafood, see friends and family. That's like one. And then the other one is Turks and Caicos. Both of them are beaches. Love the beach. So those are my two favorites.
Like it. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh, I'm so boring. Just like vanilla. I don't like a lot of crap in my ice cream.
What? Any toppings on the vanilla or just straight vanilla ice cream?
Caramel.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's.
Or Jimmy's. You guys say sprinkles, but it's Jimmy's. I'm a Yankee.
Okay. I don't even know what that means. You're speaking.
See, I told you. I'm a Yankee.
Okay. So while we're on, since you're from what I call the North, let's throw in some Northern questions. Tom Brady or Larry Bird?
Larry Bird. Tom Brady's not my friend right now.
Okay, would that answer been different 6 months ago?
Yeah.
Okay. Lobster or clam chowder?
Can I have a bowl of clam chowder and lobster after?
I was hoping you'd give me the accent. That's what I was really going for.
Wicked.
Yes. Sweet tea or peeps? That's not really a Northern thing, but it's...
Oh, gosh. No.
No on both?
No on both. Unsweetened tea and put the peeps in the trash.
All right. Best superhero?
Oh, my best superhero? Wonder Woman.
I think you dressed up as Wonder Woman, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Best
And
coffee
Superman.
spot.
I'm not picky. I'm sorry. I missed the last one.
Best coffee spot in Charlotte.
Oh, Smelly Cat.
Smelly Cat. Like it. Favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Shawshank Redemption.
East Coast or West Coast?
East Coast.
Okay. Favorite restaurant?
Cajun Queen.
Is that here or is that somewhere else?
It's here.
I've never been there. What's your go-to dish when you go there?
Etouffee, crab etouffee.
Okay. Like it. And the last and most important, either or, Shane or Emily?
I knew I was going to get this question, and I'm so prepared. Shane on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and Emily on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and Sunday is for Jesus.
Great answer.
I couldn't do it.
Shane, but great answer. I like it. I like it. All right, so you asked me some questions, so I'm going to ask you some questions this week.
Cool. Okay.
One of the questions I've heard a lot, and you've heard, and we've had a little conversation about this, is did God cause this pandemic, or is God causing all this stuff? What's your response or your answer when somebody throws that kind of just out in the air, asking that question, searching?
Yeah, I've heard that a lot too. God didn't send this. God didn't cause this. Does God get angry with us? Of course. But this is not like back when biblical plagues happened. God didn't send this. But I think that God is walking through this with us. And two, does he get angry when we don't do or use the tools that he has sent for us during this to do the right thing? It's kind of like that story about the man on the roof who needed to be saved when the flood came and an airplane came by and he said, no, I'm waiting for God. And then somebody came by in a boat and he said, no, I'm waiting for God. And then, he yells out to God, I'm waiting for you to save me. And he said, I sent an airplane, I sent a boat. We have all these things to help us get through this and to help keep us healthy, like wear a mask, wash your hands, do all these things, and yet we're so busy arguing and fighting about masks aren't necessary, and we're not taking the proper precautions all the time. I think that God gets angry when we don't do what we're supposed to, when we don't use the tools provided, and when we argue about politics and we let all these other fleshly things get in the way instead of staying focused and grounded on him. So, you and I were talking before about, Jesus went into the temple and flipped over tables, and Moses was, leading the Israelites, and the Israelites complained because all they got was manna. Well, God provided them with food to get them to the next place that they were going, but they wanted everything they had before. So I think, no, God didn't send this, but he wants to make sure we do the right thing in order to get us through it.
Something we talked about in your video, I mentioned one of the things I was kind of grateful for, and I've seen people have been grateful for, is the time to slow down. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. They're grateful for that time to slow down and spend with family. But as we move in, like, things are kicking back now. Like, things are opening up. I've been out every weekend, and every weekend I'm starting to think I'm going to be out less and less because it's getting more crowded and crowded. And people are out. People are going back to work now. Everything's kind of, that busy lifestyle is coming back. What would be your advice for people to capture and still be able to slow down in life and even spend time with God?
Yeah, I think our world's got a lot smaller when this happens. My advice, and this is something that I'm doing myself, is I'm looking at what my schedule was like before this happened, what it's like during it, and what I want it to be. And I'm taking, like, I have 11 things on my calendar from before, and I'm evaluating what those 11 things were, and I'm completely crossing 2 of them off. Like, these are the 2 things that, while there might be something wonderful or that I thought were wonderful, how unnecessary really are they? Yeah. Do they affect my budget in a negative way? Do they affect my time with family in a negative way? Do they affect my spiritual life? Are they taking away time that I could be spending with God? And I'm just crossing them off completely, so that I can spend that time with family, with God, with all those kind of things, because I think that we pile things into our calendars before because either we were trying to keep up with the Joneses, or we wanted our kids in something because all of the other kids were in it, or we just thought my kid isn't going to be who I want them to be unless they're doing all these things, or my resume isn't going to be what it needs to be unless I do all these things. And none of that is true, because God, again, it needs to be the center of everything. So I think you just go through your calendar and cross something off, intentionally cross something off.
Yeah, I really like that. That's tough, but I really like it. But it's, it kind of goes back to that. If it was easy, everybody would just do it, right?
Yeah.
Everybody would just be able to slow down, and if it was easy, but it's not. That's really tough. All right, last question for you, Katie.
Okay.
As we continue to see the church and the world change and adapt, how do we adapt missions as a church around our country and around the world?
Ooh, I like this question. And I'm going to say around the country, because I don't disagree with world mission. I think world missions are important, but I think that we as individuals and as the church have lost our focus on country and local missions a little bit. And I think that we have done a really good job at having events and things that we think are great for people in the community, but we invite them to come to us instead of going to them being the people that we think are in need. And the word "them" bothers me, because we don't know people by name. We don't build relationships. We don't ask the question, what do you need? We make assumptions about what people need. we do things because it's Christmas. And that's great, because I think that we do meet a need of joy in the moments. But when Christmas is over, we have not built relationships after that.
Yeah.
There are huge needs in the farming communities in Eastern Carolina. There are huge needs downtown with the homeless population. And I think that we as a church can be very judgmental about how people get into the situations that they're in, and that there are, that none of the homeless population have the potential to do any better than they're doing. And none of that is true. In some cases, I won't say none, but in some cases, it might be true. But we have to ask the questions about, what do you need? How can we help? And then receive the answers and respond to the answers. Because I think we have huge needs locally, and they're getting even worse because the housing problems that we have here are huge. And we also have to remember, we don't necessarily have to do things all on our own. We can partner with other churches. We can partner with other agencies. I think that's a huge thing. And it's growing because the unemployment rate has gotten so high right now. So I think that's one of those things that we need to really do. Ask the questions and not think that what we think is such a great thing to do isn't necessarily always the right thing.
Yeah. Two things. Me and you've had a lot of conversation about, we talk a lot about missions and stuff. I would even say what you're saying locally is a problem with what we do internationally or globally sometimes. You talked about we invite people in. Well, I think a lot of times we just kind of send ourselves, not really, what do they need? Do they need 20 people to go build them a home? Or would it be more beneficial for us to send all that plane ticket money, put it into their economy, let local people build homes, and let that start building itself? There's a lot of great conversation about that, which kind of goes into what you're talking about locally. And to sum that up, me and you talk about this over and over and over. If we can't serve the people right next to us, if we can't serve the people locally, we can't serve the people then regionally, you're never going to be able to serve on a bigger scale. And it starts in that small thing. If you cannot serve the people around you, if you cannot serve the people right next to you, then you're never going to be able to make that any bigger and do it well. And we've had a lot of conversation about that.
Yeah. And I think that gets to the root of a lot of the issues that we're talking about right now with racism and all of those things. I really do, because I think that we struggle with loving our neighbor and loving our neighbor well. And it's really hard to accept that could be, and not in all cases. And I never want anybody to think that I'm judging anybody on that, because I got to deal with my own mess first. But I think that in some cases that has a lot to do with how we look at our brown and Black brothers and sisters, and how we assume a lot of things. So I think that sometimes that has something to do with our struggle. And for people who grew up in all white communities, sometimes it's as simple as, I really don't know how to work with people that don't look like me or talk like me, or the language barrier that comes with working with the Hispanic population that's around. I think there's honest conversations we have to have with ourselves before we can move forward in a lot of those situations.
Yeah, I think the big word you hear right now is listen.
Yeah.
We need to listen. Well, to love, you have to listen. When I think about any kind of relationship that has love, that means there's some kind of listening going on in that loving relationship.
And last week you talked about asking the questions, and we have to ask the question, what do you need? How can we help? And receiving the answer and responding to the answer are really important.
Yeah, no, I like that. But Katie, thanks for joining us this week. This is exciting because I think we overlap work a lot behind closed during the week, and we don't get to do this that much with other people, being a part of that conversation.
I know, I miss coming in your office and clapping down out and chat.
Yeah, I'll pop in your office. You come by my office. It's kind of how we work here at the church. If you ever wonder what's going on, we're, I think, jumping office to office, and when you have an idea, you just come straight over. If I have something, go straight over to you and talk about it. And it's really a teamwork, an exciting way to be able to work in a church is through a team. You got to join us here on a Thursday.
Yeah, I'm grateful.
Back, not next Thursday, but in a few weeks next month. Be more information about that. But as things start to gear up, things start to kick back, especially things start to gear up here at church, we're excited. We're having worship service here on campus in the parking lot. Things are starting to come back slowly. And we want to see you here. We want you guys to join us and be able to be together. That's going to be so important coming back as a church, being able to be in community, which we've talked about in these past videos this week with Katie, and also this evening with Thursday Hangout with Katie. So, more information coming on that. Glad you guys got to hang out with us on this Thursday, and we'll be back shortly.